Geopolitics and Empire is joined by Hügo Krüger, who's a civil and nuclear engineer and podcast host. His most recent guest was Noam Chomsky. Welcome back to Geopolitics and Empire, Hügo.
Well, thank you, Harvey. It's very nice to be here.
It's good to have you back, and comments from the last time you were on were positive. People enjoyed what you were discussing, your worldview. I'm being silly here. You're not related to Freddie, are you, Freddie Krüger?
Well, it's his distant family, but hopefully I never get to meet him.
Maybe, not in your dreams. And so again, I'll put the link to your stuff in the description. But again, I highly recommend your Substack and your YouTube, where you're mostly doing live streaming your interviews. But I mean, Chomsky, Gareth Porter, Robert Bryce, who I've interviewed on TNT, Ian Davis, who's been on Geopolitics and Empire, just so many great people. I don't know why you're not getting more traction, but hopefully that changes going forward. And maybe to start to get, because it is Geopolitics and Empire, get your thought on the state of the world geopolitically. And, the hotspots are sort of basically Europe with, Ukraine and Russia. Middle East, you touched on that with Iran recently with Noam and Gareth, and then the whole China-Taiwan equation, and this talk of World War III. I gather that you're not too freaked out about possibly a nuclear World War III scenario, but what's sort of your feeling regarding what's going on in this great power, new Cold War 2.0 conflict between the West and the East?
Yeah, so, just sort of sketch my worldview. I'm pretty much a realist, geopolitically speaking, which is basically the mafia view of how the world works. I think great nations, at least blocs, act like mafias. But, sometimes it's behind the scenes. Mafias always trade with each other until they go into each other's turf war. And then that's when they start shooting each other. And I think that's exactly what happened in the Ukraine war. I had a cool conversation with Richard Sakwa on the origin of this conflict. And he's a good Russian expert and a post-Soviet expert, things of that sort. The Ukraine war, just simple. I think it's kind of obvious to anyone who hasn't been living under a rock that the CIA instigated a coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014 and toppled a corrupt but democratically elected government. Basically since then they've been flooding the place with weapons, so provoking Russia into war. Now Russia invades and they all throw up their hands and they say, guys, can you believe this aggressive, unprovoked aggression? And it's something that Noam Chomsky said to me yesterday. No war beforehand was ever called an unprovoked war. So why do they call it unprovoked? Because they bloody well know that they provoked it. That's kind of obvious. Now I condemn Russia's invasion. I think it's stupid. I think 200,000 people being dead. If you count both sides together, that's the numbers as best we can tell. It's a horrible loss of life. And the great tragedy is there is a peace treaty called the Minsk II Protocol, which was signed in 2015, signed by Russia, signed by Ukraine, endorsed. It was supposed to be endorsed by Samantha Power. So basically, the US said okay to it. France, Germany, everyone was on board. And the most likely outcome that Ukraine is probably going to get is something closer to that treaty. They're probably going to get less. So had we not had a war with Ukraine, we could have had a better deal for people, not killed 200,000 people that are probably we should take it as for granted. Those kids, they are probably your and my age, maybe a little bit younger than us, right? So had we been Ukrainian, we'd be dead now. Russian, we'd be dead right now. So, I find that just tragic and stupid what is going on over there. And I find the political response so irrational. There is nuclear weapons. Now, I am concerned of nuclear weapons. Like, you should not provoke Russia too far, and you should try and diffuse the tensions. So the missing word here is détente, basically. We should try and ease the tensions there. As we say that, tensions in Taiwan, that seems to be the less likely of the three conflicts, although I might be wrong on that. Iran and Israel, the US ambassador Niles just said to to Israel, do what you want with Iran. Israel and America have hacked Iran's nuclear enrichment facility at Natanz beforehand, which is an aggressive act. They have assassinated Iranian scientists. Now imagine what would happen if Iran did that to Israel. They'd be blown to pieces. So, you have major aggression in the Middle East, major aggression in Russia, Ukraine, and all we're saying is ease the tension, stop killing each other, and maybe steal money together, if you're a mafia. That's where mafias work the best. They shouldn't be fighting over the turf war. That's how I see it.
Yeah. I would just add on top of that, and I think it's a very fair assessment you give, that we're seeing now in Georgia, we had the 2003 Rose Revolution with Saakashvili, Soros, Open Society.
The revolution, yeah.
back to Saakashvili. I think he even opened his own Liberty Institute prior to that. They did the same thing in Mongolia in the early 90s, where I lived and I researched. But seems like now in Georgia they're trying to pull yet again another color revolution, and then in Hungary, Samantha Powers is preparing the ground in Hungary for a paprika revolution, as my recent guests Gavin Wax and Nathan Berger called it. They're from the New York.
So they've run out of colors, now it's fruits.
Yeah, so now it's vegetables, and in Iran we're seeing that there's this every few months we're seeing these different events with these riots or clashes with the girl with the hijab, and now it's these poisonings and stuff, and it just seems like it's again Western interference, and so it does seem like the Western Empire it keeps pressuring the different other parts of the world, whether it's Venezuela or Syria or going back to Georgia or Iran, and so any further thoughts? A quick shout out to our sponsors, which you can locate via the sponsor page on geopoliticsandempire.com, or whose links are included in every podcast description. I've tried privacy phones in the past, such as Silent Circle's Black Phone, which turned out to be a dud. The best and really only option so far is de-Googling your phone. Now, you can do it yourself, but I've never had the time to figure that out and simply got an Above phone. They sell de-Googled phones that come with a suite of software. They also provide support and a monthly Above privacy suite with many features such as a unique phone number, encryption, email, VPN, and so forth. If you're looking for a private phone, check out Above Phone. Make sure to click on the Above Phone link on geopoliticsandempire.com or via the podcast description so that we can enjoy a commission. Also, check out the Nomos Time Bank at nomos.net, which you can download in Spanish or English to your Apple or Google or de-Googled phone. Nomos allows people in your community to exchange services using time as a currency rather than fiat money. This will be one great way to survive in the coming Algorithm Ghetto. If you need health insurance, you can talk to my friend James Guzman of the Borderless blog, podcast, and health insurance. He offers free consultations. Simply schedule a time with him over at borderlesshealthinsurance.com. Finally, you can donate directly to Geopolitics and Empire, consult with me, the host, or become a member to join private monthly member Zoom calls where we shoot the breeze discussing world events.
I mean, the one in Iran I've been following very closely because my wife is from there. So I wrote an article on my Substack called The Cover Up on the history of the hijab in Iran. First of all, this Kurdish girl, Mahsa Amini, it is true. I'm going to be very measured in my answer here, but I'm not sure that the Iranian government is lying here. Okay. It is not clear to me that she died from the morality police. Her family's lawyer accepted that she had heart problems beforehand. Okay. But it is clear she's died. Now, there's been multiple cases like this in the past where girls in Iran have been mistreated by the morality police, usually in rural areas as opposed to city areas. It is institutionalized to some extent it isn't. The morality police is also misunderstood because it's not a unit, like an official unit of the state. The Basij, which is a paramilitary, can enforce it. They tend to be violent. Some of it is more like, if you went over red traffic, they take you to an area to explain to you the rules again type of thing. And in some cases, they do, abuse people. So there is human rights abuses. So this issue comes a long way. But what people haven't mentioned is the Iran's own parliament in 2018 gave an assessment of the hijab rule, and they called for the abolition of the morality police. Iran's own parliament said this. I haven't seen that being mentioned in our media. So, it's the censorship by omission with this whole issue again. Now, what is happening? Well, that story spread through a Persian International, which is a Saudi Arabia-funded Iranian newspaper in exile. Okay, so that sort of tells you already what's happening over here. They are weaponizing women's rights. Before this issue happened in Cannes, for example, the Cannes Festival, the winner was the Iranian woman who won the movie festival for the movie Holy Spider, which is a very cool film, by the way, about a serial killer in Mashhad. Anyways, at her speech, she said a few months before this revolution happens, the next revolution in Iran will be feminine. Okay, so it's sort of this thing what the CIA does where they announce things through the movies and through the films before it occurs. Well, this is the exact same story again. I'm sorry, this is a clear evidence to me that they're trying to instigate regime change, and they're using legitimate women's rights issues okay, as their convenient weapon here, as humanitarian intervention was used in the past. I mean, the Ukrainian Revolution of Dignity, yes, people were effed up, pissed off at Viktor Yanukovych, for example, and he was corrupt and all that stuff. But we know very well the National Endowment for Democracy who was involved over there. Well, they upped their budget for Iran before this revolution occurred. There's no coincidence to me. So I'm looking at it through that lens. Other interesting thing happening in Iran is I had a very interesting and important conversation with Gareth Porter on Iran's nuclear weapon. And I'm going to say it out loudly that Iran, there's no evidence whatsoever that Iran has a nuclear weapons program. Iran has never violated a non-proliferation treaty. They've signed it, and they've gone even further where they've called for a Middle Eastern nuclear-free zone. Okay, which Saudi Arabia supports, all the Arab states supports, but guess who doesn't support it? The United States and Israel. Now, why would that be? I mean, it might have to be Israel has this foreign policy called nuclear ambiguity, which is a farce, because everyone knows Israel's got nuclear weapons and they've never signed a non-proliferation treaty. Now, the interesting thing, and this is what Noam Chomsky told me last night, is if there's a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East, Israel will have to open their facilities for inspections, and that means they'll be found guilty of violating a non-proliferation treaty. That means under existing US law, you cannot send any debt or military aid to Israel. Okay, so there's a big incentive to close that gap. Because then, any country that violates a non-proliferation treaty under existing US law cannot get it. Also, another interesting one is the African Nuclear-Free Treaty. That's another treaty that's never mentioned, includes Egypt. Now, Egypt has signed it but never ratified it. And the reason Egypt doesn't want to ratify it is because if you sign that treaty, you cannot trade with a country that violates the non-proliferation treaty, which again is Israel. So that is sort of the geopolitics here. My sense is that Netanyahu is trying to escape prison sentences at the moment and is exaggerating again the threat of Iran. But that conflict is very serious at the moment. I am really worried that Israel might do something reckless and drag the US into another war. And, we know that was the strategy of the Iraq war as well. So.
Yeah, and we just saw Mark Milley out in Syria saying we're not leaving Syria, and they're reinforcing again troops in Iraq. And just one more point on Iran that I thought was interesting. Just everything you said with I agree with the movies, and it's like they want to pull Operation Ajax 2.0. Like literally they can't think of anything more creative, because I see them trotting out now more and more on the MSM, Fox and CNN. The Shah's son, I think they call him the Crown Prince in exile. Prince of what, but whatever. Pahlavi.
Yeah, Reza Pahlavi. So basically,
they're trotting him out again. It's like almost they want to do another coup and then put him back in his
not
father.
to him. There's a few groups. First of all is this Masya Linajad. Well, it seems that she lives in a safe house in the United States that is paid by the FBI and the CIA. I mean, what a coincidence, This is this so-called women's rights activist. Nobody's ever heard of her in Iran, by the way. Nobody even knew she was a famous news editor that defied the hijab laws to escape Iran. Nonsense. A visa was paid by the CIA and she made David Petraeus beforehand. Okay, that's your number one candidate. Number two is the Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi, who lives off remittances from his father that he stole from Iran that he doesn't want to give back. Okay, they asked him once, what job do you do? Well, he never doesn't work because he lives off the riches that the former Shah stole. Do you think Iranians want that guy back? No, he's a crook. Okay. Then the third one, which is even more scary, is a woman by the name of Mariam Rajavi. She is basically a cult member. She's got a cult called the MEK, Mujahideen Khalq. They are Israeli/Saudi funded group, they've got their own private town in Albania where they hack into the internet into Iran to distribute this crap. And they have got a head office here in Paris. Now, you should just look at them on the internet. They're a fanatical cult, and they've got some kind of mythology about her father being dead and killed, which never really turned out. And this is like your three candidates for regime change. So it's Operation Ajax, but Operation Ajax, at least the former Shah had some sophistication to it. This is really bad. Okay. Now, if you look at polls in Iran, I've to check this out a little bit. Across Iran, the polls say that the Iranians are fed up with their government. Okay, that's no secret. But they asked them a second question. First one is, do you trust your government? No. And then the second one, do you trust the US government? Absolutely no. Okay, so they have a problem where they have 80 million people on the Iranian plateau who trust the US government less than their own government. And do you think they're gonna accept these people? So let's assume this strategy works and we topple the mullah regime and all these things, and we get the Shah's son to come in. What's going to happen? Well, I can guarantee you within a few months, it's going to be like Egypt of Sisi, where there's another coup d'etat and the revolutionary guard just cracks down and kills the guy. This is stupidity galore, and they don't have another answer to Iran. Why? Because this is what Noam Chomsky told me last night. Iran's main problem is not that it wants nuclear weapons. It's not that it is funding Hezbollah and all these guys, which it's probably guilty of. No, Iran's main problem is its independence. The mafia does not want another mafia on its terrain, so that's why we need to crash down on it.
Yeah, it's not going along with the globalist mafia, and so anyone that's not plugging into the that system has to be changed. And maybe then to go back to the nuclear issue, I had Stephen Starr on recently, as you did, and I mentioned I've lived in Kazakhstan. I visited the principal Soviet nuclear test site, 500 plus nukes dropped there, and so I've been to ground zero at the polygon. And I guess the issue is radiation. So as you mentioned, the capacity for destruction of a nuke is there, but then separately there's the equation of radiation and fallout and that sort of thing. And you've been digging into that. What's sort of your conclusion or takeaway?
Yeah, so that very interesting one. I had a discussion with Edward Calabrese on this, the history of the LNT model, linear threshold model of radiation. Also Stephen Starr afterwards, and I disagreed with Stephen Starr, yes, but cordially, he's a very nice guy nonetheless. And so Stephen Starr's right that if we throw a nuclear bomb on a city, the smog that will go up into the atmosphere or stratosphere and rise above the clouds will basically put us in nuclear winter. Okay, that is the scariest scenario. But where I disagree with him is the fallout from radiation. I don't think it's as dangerous as people think. And I have very good data on this. The first data comes from the atomic bomb survivors. If you think of it, these were two pretty good experiments, repeated, two cities. And if you look at the life of these, of the survivors, people who were exposed to high levels of radiation, the amount of cancer is only like 6,000 to 7,000 people. That includes, and something like 3,000 above background. So I don't believe radiation causes cancer. If it does, it's at very high dosages, not low dosages. And that's sort of the thing about the nuclear has been, until the 1970s, we had nuclear safety standards that accepted a much higher threshold of background radiation. There were lots of bombs detonated in Nevada, which is probably similar to Polygon, in Kazakhstan, and there's populations living next to it. And if you look at those populations, in Utah, for example, who got most of the cloud and the fallout from Nevada, has the lowest level of cancer in the United States. And this is where the concept of radiation hormesis comes in. If you go for radiotherapy, for example, they shoot you with radiation that is 4 to 5 times higher than background radiation. And that is to boost your immune system. And it seems that cancer, at least certain types of cancer, is related to a weak immune system. So if you're exposed to radiation, your body can adapt to it. This is the point. To a certain level. I mean, obviously the guys at Chernobyl who were next to the blast died, and the people who had died in the atomic bomb, things of that sort. But argument here has been that, even if you look at Chernobyl, for example, the animals at Chernobyl, they're fine. They seem to be doing better. So you have to question why are mammals doing well in the radiation, exclusion zone? And if you look at even the amount of people who died at Chernobyl, it's something like 3,000. The amount of cancer deaths is within the noise. So the question is the risk of radiation that dangerous? And my argument is, I don't think so. And there's very good studies saying that now. And what it comes back to, there's a conspiracy behind this, is in the 1950s, Eisenhower had Atoms for Peace, and they were concerned about radiation fallout in the state. And they appointed a panel of geneticists, experts in gene therapy, who proved that radiation causes gene mutation, and that was the background of evolution. And guess who funded these guys? The Rockefeller Institute. What a big surprise. And Rockefeller obviously had an interest in making nuclear standards very strict to increase the cost of nuclear because he was selling oil. And that's basically the conspiracy behind, it's not even a conspiracy, because in their official communication, they say we are all conspirators here. They actually admitted it. And Edward Calabrese, who I interviewed, uncovered this whole story. So that's basically it. So radiation fallout, I don't think is dangerous, but a blast from nuclear weapons, you're going to die.
Just one more point on the reason why it's hyped. Then, just like anything that they hype, like climate change, like we've talked about this, that there's real environmental issues. I don't think they're existential, but then they hype it. They mix some truth with a big lie, and then they freak us out with climate change. We're all going to die. It's doomsday death cult, and then apply that same strategy. They do that with everything. International terrorism, where they're the one. It's mostly state terrorism. ISIS and Al Qaeda that's funded by the West, and so would it be this with the nuclear issue? Because they spread fear to control us. So would you say that they try to hype up this again to make us afraid to be more pliable to control as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, is it because they believe in it themselves? Probably. Humans are scared of invisible things we can't see, can't touch, things of this sort. So, I mean, you take Fukushima, for example. Only one guy has proven to the Japanese government he's had cancer from radiation, but it's not even clear that he had it. But, okay, say one person has died of cancer from radiation. Nobody has died of radiation at Fukushima. Theoretically, statistically speaking, more people died during the evacuation. And now they've got this major exclusion zone, okay, which they put people out of their houses. They can't go back. Some people refuse to go, and they seem to be fine there. So, the fear of radiation is making nuclear expensive. That the fossil fuel industry has obviously got an incentive for that. And the second one is, I do think nuclear weapons in particular are being used at the moment. They're being used to generate fear. Right. And if we can, I'm not sure if, I can get over the fear of being blown to pieces by a nuclear weapon, but a lot of the fear being told is like, if the weapon goes off, there's going to be a wasteland. And that's what you really need to be scared of. And I make the argument that the evidence for that's very poor, because people still live in Hiroshima and Nagasaki today. And nobody seems to be dying more of cancer over there. So, that added fear, that exaggerated fear, is what drives policy. And, obviously, if somebody makes you scared, he's probably making money out of it as well. And who's making money? Well, a lot of interest. Oil guys are making money. The nuclear industry makes money because all the safety stuff they can get paid for. There's a lot of people working in nuclear safety. I've also now gotten into the fact that there's a nuclear mafia. It seems Benjamin Netanyahu is heavily involved with this guy. James Corbett actually did a very good episode on this in 2018. There's a lot of interest in trying to keep nuclear scary. And the tragedy is, if we really care about the climate issue, about reducing emissions, not that I believe it's really a threat, nuclear is an obvious logical conclusion to that. But they won't open that Pandora's box. Why? Because energy is used in geopolitics for leverage. It's an interesting fact that Noam Chomsky explained to me again last night, is that when the US had the Marshall Plan, beforehand Europe had a coal-based economy, and the US used the Marshall Plan. George Kennan, the chief strategist, said, we need to get Europe on oil because we have the oil. And we can use that for leverage, basically. So, energy is linked to geopolitics. It's not a big thing.
And again, just to add onto that, there's also a Russian nuclear industrial complex. People can go back. I think 2017, when I went to Russia, I sat down with Russian expert Oleg Bodrov, where he really focuses on this Russian nuclear industrial complex and the damage they do environmentally. And just one more point, because in my Stephen Starr interview, I put photos of when I visited the Polygon. And again, I was shocked because what you talked about, we have this image of like wasteland, right? Radioactive wasteland. And I go into the Polygon I had 2 Geiger counters, and it's a huge space, 18,000 square kilometers. And, we're just going to visit one ground zero. But I still thought entering the Polygon, you'd start to pick up radiation, and it wasn't the case. But when I did get to the ground zero, there definitely there was radiation there, and on my on the photo it just shows 2, but actually was 12 to 15 in other parts. But it was a more limited area. But what would you say about? Is it more right where the bomb hits? It's a limited area where there's radiation. I mean, what would you say on that?
Well, I mean, so if you take a reactor, for example, Chernobyl, where the reactor is, I mean, radiation is measured in sieverts, Becquerel is sort of I think they use rads, and they've got REMS as well in the US. But basically, it's the amount of, you've got isotopes, and basically how much decay is left in the atom, basically. So if there's lots of decay, if it's very concentrated, yes, it's highly dangerous, it's toxic. So there's lots of energy it shoots off all the time as its half-life decreases. But the most dangerous one is right after reaction, and then there's exponential decay. Okay, so if you're at the latter end of the exponential decay, you're probably not exposed to that many. So safety, numbers differ on the experts that's looked into it, but the safety standard for nuclear workers is 10 millisieverts a year. Okay, that is ridiculously low, because for radiotherapy, they shoot you with 150. right? And some people have argued X to 700, 600, 700. But the stupidity of this thing is the radiation safety standard is called LNT, linear no threshold model. That assumes no dose of radiation ever safe. Now, there's an area in Ramsar in Iran where the background radiation is 250 millisieverts, and there's a city. So that's higher than what you experience at Polygon. So my argument is if the guys in Iran is not dying, I mean, clearly that area should never have been evacuated, or maybe it should have been evacuated for a time and people can repopulate already. And that kind of worms needs to be opened up. But you probably have to do proper studies to figure out what it is. But definitely, I would say that you can probably get 100, 150 should be fine. What is the duration of the exposure? That remains to be seen. Because remember, if radiation hits basically your cells, basically the molecules go bust. It's ionizing radiation, but your body has a repair mechanism. You have meiosis, so it's like getting a sunburn. That's theoretically damage from radiation. You get out of the sun, your body heals, and then it sort of tans, and that tan makes you more resistant. And that resistance is what they call radiation hormesis. So if you're exposed to low dose radiation, your body learns to adapt to that environment, as people in polluted cities learn to adapt, all these type of things. We're evolutionary beings to a certain threshold, so there's a certain range of radiation that is probably safe, and we know our standards are conservative, but we need to determine what that threshold is. In France, they did a study a few years ago, 2007, the Académie des Sciences, and they came out and they said below 150 millisieverts, so that's 15 times background radiation, they cannot statistically significant detect any cancers. Okay, so maybe that's a threshold. So, these things have to be determined, but we know that we have been too scared of this stuff for a very long time. And that means part of Chernobyl, you can probably repopulate, but it has to be scientifically proven. I mean, I wouldn't say let's go back all the way, and then be reckless like that. But I would say that there is good evidence to say that we can question some of the things we've been taught.
I just keep thinking of more questions when it comes to this radiation stuff. And just one more when it comes to people with cancer and then the chemotherapy, the radiation therapy. I viewed that like if I got cancer, I would look at many different natural ways to deal with it first. And I viewed chemotherapy as harmful. Do you have any thought on the radiation?
So chemo is not radiation therapy. Chemotherapy, statistically, it doesn't seem, in my view, to do anything. I mean, I'm not a cancer specialist, so take it with caution. Radiation therapy, though, there's very good work by Professor Mohan Das, Mohandas, is an Indian immigrant to the United States, and he has shown how the atomic bomb survivors have lower rates of cancer, and he's been treating people using safety thresholds of radiation. He seems to have had success with that, so that's something to look into. Another thing, by the way, if you have cancer, it's been known for years that people who go to hot spas, tend to have lower rates of cancers. Now, is that because of the beautiful blondes in Norway? Might be. That's a good, plausible hypothesis. Or it might be that they're exposed to radiation, actually. And it seems to be that at least some types of cancers, are lower of radiation. So that's maybe a natural radiation exposure. I would say cancers also, I had an interesting conversation with David Raznick. He thinks it's a chromosomal imbalance theory. And his arguments he makes is it's excessive exposure to toxins in the environment, probably true carcinogens. Again, I suspect above a certain threshold, because our body can take certain poisons, even arsenic, to a certain level, but certain dose is lethal. So, I don't know too much about cancer to say it. If I get cancer, I don't really know what I will do. I would probably consider radiation therapy based on what I've read right now, but I'm not sure to give you. I don't have a medical advice on that.
And YouTube now is going to flag that recommendation as pseudo. What do you call it? Pseudo whatever. Quack science.
Quackery, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Moving then to the biosecurity state. The global technocratic dystopia, and you have some experience in this in urban planning. You last time you told us about what happened in South Africa, and again the issue is here the algorithm ghetto, right? The digital IDs and the health passports, and I've been telling this story in recent weeks. I used to teach at the Tec de Monterrey, which is owned by FEMSA, which is an actual partner with the World Economic Forum. In fact, Tec de Monterrey, one of the top schools in Mexico, the only university in all of Latin America to be invited to Davos, and so they just rolled out on their campus the first OXXO convenience store that's smart. No people, no cash accepted. You have to register your phone, scan a QR code. You walk in. It's like this Amazon and Whole Foods stores. So you take whatever you want and you leave. and then they're prototyping it now, and then they're thinking of. They said they can replicate it to all across Mexico, to hospitals and malls and parks and you name it. And so this is the fourth industrial revolution we're seeing now being driven from Mexico to US to Europe, you name it, China. And so you're not. What are your latest thoughts as to the whole COVID-19-94 biosecurity thing? Is it going to end? And how do you see them pushing forward? With this cash.
Well, there's clearly people pushing for this stuff, right? There's no doubt about it. Davos, it's a variety of interests. I don't think it's just Davos, but they definitely at the center of a lot of the scrappy ideas. My suspicion is, yes, it can be damaging, but people will adapt around the rules. And people will find ways to corrupt the system, as was the case in apartheid South Africa. Some people have told me even in Soviet Russia, even under Stalinism, they found ways to make money when it was illegal to do so. They had ways to break the system. And I've seen this in a variety of countries in the world with crappy governments. I mean, look at Argentina. How many times haven't they had inflation, right? Where theoretically you've got no way out, but people find ways to put dollars under their bed. So I really doubt the ability of these technologies to be so controlling, on a personal level. But I mean, it is damaging. It's an idiotic brain dead idea. Essentially, it comes down to rationing. That you can have a certain carbon footprint and you can travel here, you can't do this, whatever. But look at the resistance against it. I mean, we now have governors in the United States speaking out against this stuff, right? We have certain states blocking. What did DeSantis say? The Davos stuff is out of question here. We have people in Europe speaking out against it, and look at the media reputation that Davos has gotten. Look at those interviews from Rebel News, etc. I mean, there's a lot more people questioning this stuff. So I'm optimistic that people are going to push back against this in their own ways and very creative ways. I mean, I actually want them to try and censor the internet because there's so many clever kids who know to work their way around DARPA. That will find alternatives. How many people didn't discover Odyssey and other platforms during COVID because they tried to censor YouTube? And my sense is if you know how to adapt, if you have a sense of the stuff, you would survive it.
I like your attitude. I mean, I've been joking about this. My phrase I came up with was, we're privileged to be beta testing the mark of the beast system. So we're like those engineers who are beta testing these iterations, and it's
well, the critique against this stuff, right, is F.A. Hayek had a very good critique against the Soviet Union, which was a centralized authority has an intelligence problem. He doesn't know how to distribute resources. Now, EOB-based supercomputers doesn't have the algorithm to distribute it. It cannot predict demand. You've got a system that changes from time 1 to time 0. So if you're going to try and manage a society on this technocratic basis, it's going to be a F-up very quickly. And that's my sense of it,
Yeah.
So no, I'm not concerned. I'm somewhat concerned, obviously. I don't really want to fight the system like this because I would like it to not be implemented in the first place. But I think sometimes people are too much obsessed with this, and then they don't miss stuff that's happening in contemporary politics. Because just by looking at geopolitics, as we just spoke about, the war in Ukraine to me is far more concerning than this thing at the moment.
Yeah, and we've sort of covered the waterfront. Anything else that's that you're looking at that you want to mention?
Well, no. The only thing is, at the moment, I'm trying to. So I'm on my way to try and maybe understand the Middle East a little bit better and understand the conflicts over there. I should have done it earlier, but I've gotten a little bit more outspoken against Israel because of what's going on over there. And let's face it, a lot of people don't want to be outspoken against Israel because of the Holocaust and the Second World War and all those things. And yeah, sure, you should not go into that land too far. But I'm very skeptical about the intentions, especially Netanyahu's intentions with Iran at the moment. I think Netanyahu is doing enormous damage to Israeli democracy. He's trying to avoid a prison sentence, and he's actively undermining the judicial system, and he's consequently kicking Palestinians off their land, in a process of doing so, and potentially pulling the United States into another unwinnable war with Iran. So that is sort of where my attention is at the moment, and what I would like people to not lose track of while the war in Ukraine is going on. I understand there's a lot of things to worry about, but that is sort of really what we need to push against, is the militarism that has taken over the US establishment, and it seems to be a Republican and Democrat thing. There is like no pushback from the authority against the military, and it can so easily change with a few policies. Policy sits behind all of this, Amanda.
Yeah, there was a recent Gallup poll that interviewed Americans, and they've captured both the left and the right. So they interviewed that the biggest menace the left finds is the Russians. So they're like pro-war with Russia, and then the right is they viewed China as the biggest enemy. 76% of Republicans viewed China. So it's like, as you said, this is bipartisan military-industrial complex has captured all swaths of America, and they've gotten them ready for war with Eurasia, with the world island, with China and Russia. And just on the Israeli point, I'm catching more flack now. I've got Canadian vice journalists that are financed by the Canadian government, which is merely an outpost of the U.S. empire. They're probably listening now. They're noting down all my Geopolitics Empire podcast interviews and TNT and trying to make me out to be some fascist Nazi anti-Semite when I'm speaking out against fascism. The past couple of years, I frequently
everyone is a Nazi except those guys in Ukraine, right?
Yeah, my grandfather was a Croatian Nazi prisoner, and I just thought the ADL tweeted yesterday. This is ridiculous. I mean, the ADL tweet says. And I'm not even a Trump voter. I'm not like a MAGA. I don't classify as a Trump supporter or MAGA. They said former President Trump also delivered remarks that were in character, but still dangerous. And they said his claims about expelling warmongers, driving out globalists, casting out communists, and throwing off those who hate our country, basically like enemies, echo classic anti-Semitic rhetoric. So by ADL's own admission, they're like, if they think all that stuff is dangerous or wrong, then it sounds like the ADL are warmongers, are globalists, and they're communists.
But I wonder, did a computer write that statement, or did they actually? Is it like this new AI generated stuff? Or
it's actual tweet person? From ADL tweet from ADL's account. So, but by their own admission, they're saying they support. They're pro-war, pro-globalism, and pro-communism, and pro-allowing enemies to destroy your country. I mean, this is just. It's
just plain stupid. I wonder how you can get into this echo chamber and not realize how absurd you sound. I mean, the other guys that are similar to me are you're a climate denialist people. So I did a lot of climate change down. I think a lot of this is overblown stuff. And I've gotten a lot of flack from this, and I had a debate on my channel between Gerald Kutchny, who is like a pro-climate person, and Tony Hiller, who's a really cool debunker. And Tony Hiller destroyed him in debate. But then people comment, right? And people but Kutney won the debate. And I'm like, did I watch the same hour that you guys watched? Like, am I living in an alternative universe? And the only way I can explain these people is they're in a cult. There's a climate cult. There was a Great America MAGA cult around Trump for a while. There is a woke cult. Everything to me is getting the narratives are getting really extreme and just plain stupid. Like at the end of it, because you're around people that only agree with you. That you get to that point where everything is a Nazi. So everything's a Nazi. You hate communism, you're a Nazi. You hate. You say you want to fight your country's enemies, which seems reasonable to me. Like for any patriot, you're a Nazi. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, it's gone too far, and this is what social media is doing.
But I'm glad it's going that way, because I think a lot of people will. I mean, anyone who's got a few brain cells will have to see through it. I mean, there's always going to be a certain percentage of the population that stays indoctrinated, that believes what CNN or Fox News tells them. But I'm glad, if there's one good thing that came out of COVID, is that so many people, and myself included, to be honest, have really questioned the nature of the media and propaganda. I mean, I did not think that propaganda was this deeply entrenched in society. And, I'm still learning every day how people are trying to mess with my head. So every big claim from authority these days, I am so skeptical of. I go and I verify it. And I think that's sort of the attitude that everyone has to take on.
But I agree with you, but I do also see people's brains being broken, because there are people just flooding my comments with the earth is flat, all this new age stuff, and infectious disease doesn't exist. I know there's people with the no virus stuff, but putting it all together, the Jews behind everything, flat earth, and on and on. And it's like their brains are being, but they're so incessant, which is the issue. It's like, okay, I have this idea, talk about it reasonably, but they're just incessant. They won't stop. They're banging on just about that. And I'm like, look, I got other things to do. Get out, get some sunshine, have a meal.
But it's sort of the people, I find who's still on COVID, virus, no virus. Now, I personally don't see a new virus. If there was, it's probably just rebranded flu, or there was never a pandemic, whatever. But be that as it may, move on. It's sort of what I want to tell people. There's other issues at this stage. I mean, I said it last time I was on your channel. I'm still surprised people are still going on, but this guy said it came from a lab and you need to listen to him. And I'm like, guys, I don't care anymore. I'm just so over that issue. It happened. People made money. They screwed people. They locked us in our homes. They abused us. Move on. They're now abusing you with Ukraine. And it seems to me that story has lost its traction already. So I'm wondering, aren't they going to start a war with Iran? Are they going to start a war with Taiwan? I don't know. I don't know what the next crazy story is, but there is going to be one, and be prepared for that one. Or just go on holiday for a while, relax, come back, chill a bit. The world is not coming to an end. Don't believe in the apocalypse, and know the Jews don't control everything. You also are in control of your own life.
Those are great, I think, final thoughts for us. And you're a lot of things you said I'd agree with there. I'll include again your links in the description, but again, where are the best places to find you, or your top projects for us to follow?
Substack, they can subscribe there. YouTube, I've got still a YouTube channel. I'm still on Pentagon Tube. They haven't kicked me off yet. And Twitter, I'm still on Elon Musk, who is the military intelligence contractor that's supposed to save free speech platform. At least he's opened it up a little bit, but he's still censoring. We all know that. So, that's where you'll find me. Most of my stuff will be on Substack, and I'm also writing an article soon for was it The American Mind with Joel Kotkin. I still go authoring with him. So it's on a variety of platforms, propaganda and focus. I wrote a little bit for them as well on Egypt and the Green Deal and stuff. So it's all over the place.
Yeah, and Pentagon Tube, that's what I call it. I mean, let's just call things as they are, call a spade. Pentagon Tube and, DARPA's LifeLog, which is Facebook and so on and so forth. And so, all right, Hügo, until next time, thanks for being on Geopolitics and Empire.
All right, thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this Geopolitics and Empire podcast. The website is geopoliticsandempire.com, and I encourage you to sign up for the free email list that goes out with each podcast and every weekend with a collection of news headlines. The newsletter and website are our last lines of defense. We're being censored and deplatformed. It's nearly impossible to find Geopolitics and Empire on the Google search engine. We've been blacklisted. YouTube frequently takes down our videos with strikes. Facebook restricts our page. Reddit and Twitter take down posts. And after the Associated Press mentioned Geopolitics and Empire in a 2021 article co-written with NATO, our Patreon account was terminated. Vimeo also terminated our Pro account. The best free way to help Geopolitics and Empire is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or elsewhere and subscribe to all of our media channels. You can find the video broadcast now on 5 platforms: Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, BitChute, and Brighteon. You can find the audio broadcast on the podcast ecosystem: SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, and so on. My current favorite social media channels are Twitter and Telegram, but you can also find us on Gab, MeWe, Minds, Float, VK, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Finally, Geopolitics and Empire is in dire need of funding to continue. You can leave a donation, purchase a consultation with the host, or become a member to receive additional benefits. We also produce a weekly broadcast called Dissident Thinker for members and Rockfin subscribers only. We will continue to fight the good fight come hell or high water. Thank you for listening.